And we are happening. Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you may be. I am Tad. I am right here downstairs in the basement of Doom in my office. I am going to be reading, I think tonight we are going to be finishing The Sword and the Stone. But more about that in a moment. Let me think. Anything else to tell? I had a had a tough day with work today just because I suddenly got. I think I sort of alluded to this last night. I got to this point where I was plotting, and I have gotten my characters from point A to point B, and then suddenly realized that if I continued the way I was continuing, I would have to take them back from point B to point A, which may be what happens in the real world quite frequently. But in a novel, it's problematic for a number of reasons. For one, because even unless it's something super dramatic, readers sense this feeling of staying in one place when you what I call oscillate. When you oscillate, when you have things happen but they don't change anything, or when they happen but they're not super important, and it becomes a case of hoping that the reader continues to stay invested. Whereas most of the time, what I or any writer of this kind of fiction is trying to do is to keep the reader, as I put it, continuously falling forward. In other words, you keep putting things in front of them, and before those are resolved, you go back to something that you had left unresolved earlier. So even though the reader is potentially ticked off at you for not finishing what you were doing there and giving them the answers or showing them how the characters survived or whatever the case may be, but you cut it off, but then you give them something that you had left them equally irritated on earlier. At least that's the plan. So I found myself today just in a funk. Didn't help any that my football team lost a really miserable game too, but that's life. It's not the end of the world. But anyway, so I found myself very irritated with myself, to make it clear, because nobody else is doing this but me. So I can't claim that somebody came and messed it up for me, or that it was the government, or the billionaires or whatever, because it's my words in my computer. But I found myself frustrated with this particular situation I had got myself into. So I've spent most of the day really irritated, and because of that, I've been going back over various things and looking at not the original outline, because I already know what the outline says, but saying, what if I changed this, what if I changed this? And of course, at a certain point, the potential changes are endless. That's the whole thing about something that you're making up. You can literally do anything you want as long as it works for the readers. And at this point, there are no readers except me. So it has to work for me. And I found myself very annoyed by this idea of going forward and then going backward physically, back to an earlier location when there was no real dramatic value to it. It made sense within the context of the story. So anyway, I'm just telling you all this just so you'll know how these processes work and why writers sometimes look like they have real jobs because it's work. It's work, and it's especially work when you're realizing that, like, okay, I don't like that. I'm going to have to yank that out. But because these things are all connected, it's like they've got ivy growing over them, or kudzu, for those of you who live in the southern part of America and know what kudzu is, or in Japan, because they got it there too. That's where it came from. So yeah, I've spent most of the day today lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, avoiding the football game, which I had a bad feeling about, and trying to think my way through. And of course, a zillion other things, because it's the holiday season, it's the this, it's the that. We've got all these other things. Our kids are moving, and they need us to guarantee their new place, and we have to fill out forms, and just life. Life is there, but meanwhile, in the midst of life, always is work. So that's why I'm a bit grumpy and disgruntled today. And as many people have pointed out before me, who the hell has ever been gruntled? What does that mean exactly, disgruntlement? because obviously it's a negative. When you're disgruntled, it means you're unhappy with something. But that implies that being gruntled means that you're pleased with something. And, needless to say, I have never in my life, except maybe once or twice when people are doing wordplay, have I ever heard anyone or read anyone using the term gruntled to represent happiness or contentment. Like I was so gruntled yesterday when that happened. Yeah, man, that was great. So that's the main substance. We still have no stairs. We have stairs, obviously, but they're varnished and they're drying. So I was talking last night about the strangeness, the psychological geography of a house changing when you can't go from one place to another anymore and actually have to go out of the house and downstairs and around the side and in through another door, and you have to interact with the real world outside, even if it's just the weather. So that's been strange too, although that has nothing to do with my dilemma. My dilemma, the one I was just talking about at great length, is purely of my own making, and I will solve it too, because that's part of the process. Is you perceive there's something that needs to be fixed, and for a while you may put it off and go like, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there, or I'll see how it looks when I actually finish this chapter or whatever. And then when you get to a certain point, it becomes increasingly clear, like, no, this is not what I want to do, and how will I fix it? So that's my job in the next few days, along with a bunch of other stuff that I've got to do and go out to various bureaucratic sinkholes and deal with various bureaucratic nonsense. But again, that's modern life. So that's where I'm at. I'm in a grumpy mood, but not at all with you guys. And I'm so pleased to be here and sharing time with you. And it's much better than watching the 49ers get their booties kicked or struggling with my own misperceptions of what I wanted to do with my book. So with that said, I am going to go and look and see who has checked in. And so far, I can see Isaac. Hello, Isaac. I see Tim. That's Tim Speckens. Hello, Tim. Jeremy. My dear friend Jeremy. There's Ray Weatherford. Hi, Ray. Claudia. Hello, Claudia. Tracy, as always, faithful and kind. Dale Schweniger. Hello, Dale. I don't think I know if I've seen you before on these, so pleasure to see you. It's been a long time since we've seen each other in person. Hope you're well. Emily Bell, who I will be doing a YouTube thing with in about 4 days, as far as I know, unless that's changed, but I think Emily would let me know, so I'm assuming we're still doing it. Barban, hello, Barban. Good to see you. Christy Sanders and Kristen Rule. Good to see you both. Medardo. Bienvenido, señor, amigo mío. Es un placer verte. And Kelly Kenrick, I have a note from as well. So hello, Kelly. Good to see you. Those are the folks that have checked in and that I know to say hello to. And I always like to be able to say hello when I can. It's one nice thing about the intimacy of this particular thing is that I actually can say hello to people, which I know is probably, we all kind of enjoy that reminder that, yeah, this is actually happening now in the real world. Real people connecting despite the technology that is between us but isn't enabling it. I am not anti-technology, folks. Believe me, I am sometimes anti-bad interfaces. I am anti-unnecessary complication. I am oftentimes against getting people out of the way and putting in more bots and more quote-unquote AI interfaces and et cetera, et cetera. And I was on the phone with our TV provider today, and I've said this before, but I will say it again because it's so perfect. They're trying so desperately hard to peel me off of what I want and onto an AI assistant. And, I've done the AI assistants with this particular provider. It's not that they're bad. It's just that I already know that's not what I want. But they're programmed. When you first get in on the phone tree, they are programmed to keep trying to roll you off, so that to reduce the burden on actual people, who, by the way, are, as we all know, are usually in another country somewhere, because that's how technical service works these days, or tech support. It's oftentimes literally farmed out to other countries. And, you almost have to admire the dogged way these chatbots keep trying to get you to go talk to other chatbots instead of wanting to just stay on the line. And then you wind up waiting 20 minutes to get a real human. And if you're lucky, the problem gets resolved once you talk to the real human. But the amount of time I spent turning down the AI chatbots and saying, no, live agent, no, live agent, no, live agent, it would have cut my waiting time for the eventual phone call back in half. So it's no wonder that I find some of this stuff a bit appalling. But so far, that's because most tech is being driven by money and the consumer market, but more the business market, and specifically the AI end of tech and all that kind of stuff is very much driven by people who want to use it to make more money. And I don't begrudge them that, honestly, but when it means to that you're depreciating the quality of the interaction and you're getting rid of human beings at the same time, you've already, these companies have already offshored everything they could offshore and sent, responsibility to various countries with cheaper pay scales or whatever, and everybody does it. I'm not signaling out my service provider for our, entertainment stuff. Everybody does it. Apple does it. Everybody does it. They send this stuff overseas where it's cheaper. But, of course, it also means that you're constantly struggling against the tide of economic history, which you never win. You never win. So, yeah, I'm complaining about this stuff merely because that's on my mind today. But I'm not kidding myself that somebody's going to suddenly say, he's right. We should reroute our entire system so that our customers get to talk to real people. Because that would cost an extra, $10 million a year. And even if these companies are making $15 billion a year, they're not going to fork it out. It just doesn't happen that way. Welcome to late stage capitalism. Anyway, so I have done all those things. It is now about 12 after. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about. No, I'm going to make one last check to see if anybody else has showed up that I should say hello to. Although I don't. Yeah, I think it's all pretty much what I expected. So, all right. And so I'm going to finish up with The Sword and the Stone, I think. If I finish early, I'm just going to wrap it at that point. Otherwise, I may go right up to the edge of the thing. I have no idea. It's about as long as the reading I did last night. So that's where we are. So where we were in the story, as of last night, was that it was the day that Kay was going to be knighted, or that was just about there. Wart was depressed because of the fact that he is just, going to be a squire, and he's seeing his entire life stretching out in front of him, and he's not all that thrilled about it. He has gone, Merlin transformed him and made it clear this was the last time, which is added to Wart's depression. And he became a badger and eventually wound up sitting with the badger, who's a friend of Merlin's, and heard the badger's theories about various things having to do with human beings and why they dominate the food chain. So then we started another section in which King Pellinor has shown up after a long time of being away from the story, chasing the questing beast, and has announced that there is a big to-do going on because King Uther Pendragon has died. And after everybody reacts to that, somebody asks, I think it's Sir Grumore, says, I'll just read that part. And then we'll just continue forward from there. It is all very well for you to keep, this is Grumore keeps saying, the king is dead, long live the king. It is all very well for you to keep on mentioning that, my dear Grumore, exclaimed King Pellinor petulantly. But who is this king? What? That is to live so long, what, according to you? Well, his heir, said Sir Grumore, rather taken aback. Oh, blessed monarch, said the nurse tearfully, never had no heir. Anybody that studied the loyal family knowed that. Good gracious, exclaimed Sir Ector, but he must have had a next of kin. That's just it, cried King Pellinore in high excitement. That's the exciting part of it, what? No hair and no next of skin, and who's to succeed to the throne? That's what my friar was so excited about, what? And why he was asking who could succeed to what? What? Do you mean to tell me, exclaimed Sir Grummore indignantly, that there ain't no king of Gramarye? Not a scrap of one, cried King Pellinore, feeling important. And there have been signs and wonders of no mean might. I think it's a scandal, said Sir Grummore. God knows what the dear old country is coming to, due to these lollards and communists, no doubt. What sort of signs and wonders? Asked Sir Ector. Well, there has appeared a sort of sword in a stone, what? In a sort of a church. Not in the church, if you see what I mean, and not in the stone, but that sort of thing, what? Like you might say? I don't know what the church is coming to, said Sir Grummore. It's an anvil, explained the king. The church? No, the sword. But I thought you said the sword was in the stone. No, said King Pellinore, the stone is outside the church. Look here, Pellinore, said Sir Ector. You have a bit of a rest, old boy, and start again. Here, drink up this horn of mead, and take it easy. The sword, said King Pellinore, is stuck through an anvil, which stands on a stone. It goes right through the anvil and into the stone. The anvil is stuck to the stone. The stone stands outside a church. Give me some more mead. I don't think that's much of a wonder, remarked Sir Grummore. What I wonder at is that they should allow such things to happen. But you can't tell nowadays, what with all these Saxon agitators. My dear fella, cried King Pellinore, getting excited again, it's not where the stone is, what? That I'm trying to tell you, but what is written on it, what? Where it is. What? Why, on its pommel. Come, Sir Pellinore, said Sir Ector. You just sit quite still with your face to the wall for a minute, and then tell us what you are talking about. Take it easy, old boy, no need for hurrying. You sit still and look at the wall, there's a good chap, and talk as slow as you can. There are words written on this sword in this stone outside this church, cried King Pellinore piteously, and these words are as follows. Oh, do try to listen to me, you two, instead of interrupting all the time about nothing, for it makes a man's head go ever so. What are these words? Asked Kay. The words say this, said King Pellinore, so far as I can understand from that old friar of orders grey. Go on, do, said Kay, for the king had come to a halt. Go on, said Sir Ector. What do these words on this sword, in this anvil, in this stone outside this church say? Some red propaganda, no doubt, remarked Sir Grummore. King Pellinore closed his eyes tight, extended his arms in both directions, and announced in capital letters, Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is right wise king born of all England. Who said that? Asked Sir Grummore. But the sword said it, like I tell you. Talkative weapon, remarked Sir Grummore skeptically. It was written on it, cried the king angrily. Written on it, in letters of gold. Why didn't you pull it out then? Asked Sir Grummore. But I tell you that I wasn't there. All this that I am telling you was told to me by that friar I was telling you, like I tell you. Has the sword with its inscription been pulled out? Inquired Sir Ector. No, whispered King Pellinore dramatically. That's where the whole excitement comes in. They can't pull this sword out at all, although they have all been trying like fun, and so they have had to proclaim a tournament all over England for New Year's Day, so that the man who comes to the tournament and pulls out the sword can be king of all England forever. What? I say? Oh, Father, cried Kay, the man who pulls that sword out of the stone will be the king of England. Can't we go to the tournament, Father, and have a shot? Couldn't think of it, said Sir Ector. Long way to London, said Sir Grummore, shaking his head. My father went there once, said King Pellinore. Kay said, Oh, surely we could go. When I am knighted, I shall have to go to a tournament somewhere, and this one happens at just the right date. All the best people will be there, and we should see the famous knights and great kings. It does not matter about the sword, of course, but think of the tournament, probably the greatest there has ever been in Gramarye, and all the things we should see and do. Dear Father, let me go to this tourney, if you love me, so that I may bear away the prize of all in my maiden fight. But, Kay, said Sir Ector, I have never been to London. All the more reason to go. I believe that anybody who does not go for a tournament like this will be proving that he has no noble blood in his veins. Think what people will say about us if we do not go and have a shot at that sword. They will say that Sir Ector's family was too vulgar and knew it had no chance. We all know the family has no chance, said Sir Ector. That is for the sword. Lots of people in London, remarked Sir Grummore with a wild surmise. So they say. He took a deep breath and goggled at his host with eyes like marbles. And shops, added King Pellinore suddenly, also beginning to breathe heavily. Dang it, cried Sir Ector, bumping his horn mug on the table so that it spilled. Let's all go to London, then, and see the new king. They rose up as one man. Why shouldn't I be as good a man as my father? Exclaimed King Pellinore. Dash it all, cried Sir Grummore. After all, damn it all, it is the capital. Hooray, shouted Kay. Lord have mercy, said the nurse. At this moment the wart came in with Merlin, and everybody was too excited to notice that, if he had not been grown up now, he would have been on the verge of tears. Oh, Wart, cried Kay, forgetting for the moment that he was only addressing his squire, and slipping back into the familiarity of their boyhood. What do you think? We are all going to London for a great tournament on New Year's Day. Are we? Yes, and you will carry my shield and spears for the jousts, and I shall win the palm of everybody, and be a great knight. Well, I'm glad we are going, said the wart, for Merlin is leaving us too. Oh, we shan't need Merlin. He is leaving us, repeated the wart. Leaving us? Asked Sir Ector. I thought it was we that were leaving. He is going away from the forest sauvage. Sir Ector said, Come now, Merlin, what's all this about? I don't understand all this a bit. I have come to say goodbye, Sir Ector, said the old magician. Tomorrow my pupil Kay will be knighted, and the next week my other pupil will go away as his squire. I have outlived my usefulness here, and it is time to go. Now, don't say that, said Sir Ector. I think you're a jolly useful chap, whatever happens. You just stay and teach me, or be the librarian or something. Don't you leave an old man alone after the children have flown. We shall all meet again, said Merlin. There is no cause to be sad. Don't go, said Kay. I must go, replied their tutor. We have had a good time while we were young, but it is the nature of time to fly. There are many things in other parts of the kingdom which I ought to be attending to just now, and it is a specially busy time for me. Come, Archimedes, say goodbye to the company. Goodbye, said Archimedes tenderly to the wart. "Goodbye," said the wart without looking up at all. "But you can't go," cried Sir Ector. "Not without a month's notice." "Can't I?" replied Merlin, taking up the position always used by philosophers who propose to dematerialize. He stood on his toes, while Archimedes held tight to his shoulder, began to spin slowly like a top, spun faster and faster till he was only a blur of grayish light, and in a few seconds there was no one there at all. "Goodbye, wart!" cried two faint voices outside the solar window. "Goodbye," said the wart for the last time, and the poor fellow went quickly out of the room. Chapter 23. The knighting took place in a whirl of preparations. Kay's sumptuous bath had to be set up in the box room between two towel horses and an old box of selected games, which contained a worn-out straw dartboard. It was called fléchette in those days, because all the other rooms were full of packing. The nurse spent the whole time constructing new warm pants for everybody, on the principle that the climate of any place outside the forest sauvage must be treacherous to the extreme. And, as for the sergeant, he polished all the armor till it was quite brittle, and sharpened the swords till they were almost worn away. At last it was time to set out. Perhaps, if you happen not to have lived in the old England of the 12th century, or whenever it was, and in a remote castle on the borders of the marches at that, you will find it difficult to imagine the wonders of their journey. The road or track ran most of the time along the high ridges of the hills or downs, and they could look down on either side of them upon the desolate marshes where the snowy reeds sighed and the ice crackled, and the duck in the red sunsets quacked loud on the winter air. The whole country was like that. Perhaps there would be a moory marsh on one side of the ridge, and a forest of 100,000 acres on the other, with all the great branches weighted in white. They could sometimes see a wisp of smoke among the trees, or a huddle of buildings far out among the impassable reeds, and twice they came to quite respectable towns, which had several inns to boast of, but on the whole it was an England without civilization. The better roads were cleared of cover for a bowshot on either side of them, lest the traveler should be slain by hidden thieves. They slept where they could, sometimes in the hut of some cottager who was prepared to welcome them, sometimes in the castle of a brother knight who invited them to refresh themselves, sometimes in the firelight and fleas of a dirty little hovel with a bush tied to a pole outside. This was the signboard used at that time by inns, and once or twice on the open ground, all huddled together for warmth between their grazing chargers. Wherever they went, and wherever they slept, the east wind whistled in the reeds, and the geese went high overhead in the starlight, honking at the stars. London was full to the brim. If Sir Ector had not been lucky enough to own a little land in Pye Street, on which there stood a respectable inn, they would have been hard put to find a lodging. But he did own it, and as a matter of fact drew most of his dividends from that source, so they were able to get 3 beds between the 5 of them. They thought themselves fortunate. On the first day of the tournament, Sir Kay managed to get them on the way to the lists at least an hour before the jousts could possibly begin. He had lain awake all night, imagining how he was going to beat the best barons in England, and he had not been able to eat his breakfast. Now he rode at the front of the cavalcade with pale cheeks, and Wart wished there was something he could do to calm him down. For country people who only knew the dismantled tilting ground of Sir Ector's castle, the scene which met their eyes was ravishing. It was a huge green pit in the earth, about as big as the arena at a football match. It lay 10 feet lower than the surrounding country, with sloping banks, and the snow had been swept off it. It had been kept warm with straw, which had been cleared off that morning, and now the close-worn grass sparkled green in the white landscape. Round the arena there was a world of color, so dazzling and moving and twinkling as to make one blink one's eyes. The wooden grandstands were painted in scarlet and white. The silk pavilions of famous people pitched on every side were azure and green and saffron and checkered. The pennons and pennoncelles, which floated everywhere in the sharp wind, were flapping with every color of the rainbow as they strained and slapped at their flagpoles. And the barrier down the middle of the arena itself was done in chessboard squares of black and white. Most of the combatants and their friends had not yet arrived, but one could see from those few who had come how the very people would turn the scene into a bank of flowers, and how the armor would flash, and the scalloped sleeves of the heralds jig in the wind as they raised their brazen trumpets to their lips to shake the fleecy clouds of winter with joyances and fanfares. "Good heavens!" cried Sir Kay. "I have left my sword at home." "Can't joust without a sword," said Sir Grummore. "Quite irregular." "Better go and fetch it," said Sir Ector. "You have time." "My squire will do," said Sir Kay. "What a damned mistake to make. Here, squire, ride hard back to the inn and fetch my sword. You shall have a shilling if you fetch it in time." The wart went pale, as Sir Kay was, and looked as if he were going to strike him. Then he said, "It shall be done, master," and turned his ambling palfrey against the stream of newcomers. He began to push his way toward their hostelry as best he might. "To offer me money," cried the wart to himself, "to look down at this beastly little donkey affair off his great charger, and to call me squire. Oh, Merlin, give me patience with the brute and stop me from throwing his filthy shilling in his face." When he got to the inn, it was closed. Everybody had thronged to see the famous tournament, and the entire household had followed after the mob. Those were lawless days, and it was not safe to leave your house or even to go to sleep in it unless you were certain that it was impregnable. The wooden shutters bolted over the downstairs window were 2 inches thick, and the doors were double barred. "Now what do I do?" asked the wart, "to earn my shilling?" He looked ruefully at the blind little inn and began to laugh. "Poor Kay," he said. "All that shilling stuff was only because he was scared and miserable, and now he has good cause to be. Well, he shall have a sword of some sort if I have to break into the Tower of London. How does one get hold of a sword?" he continued. "Where can I steal one? Could I waylay some knight, even if I am mounted on an ambling pad, and take his weapons by force? There must be some swordsmith or armorer in a great town like this whose shop would be still open." He turned his mount and cantered off along the street. There was a quiet churchyard at the end of it, with a kind of square in front of the church door. In the middle of the square there was a heavy stone with an anvil on it, and a fine new sword was stuck through the anvil. "Well," said the wart, "I suppose it is some sort of war memorial, but it will have to do. I am sure nobody would grudge Kay a war memorial if they knew his desperate straits." He tied his reins round a post of the lich gate, strode up the gravel path, and took hold of the sword. "Come, sword," he said, "I must cry your mercy and take you for a better cause." "This is extraordinary," said the wart. "I feel strange when I have hold of this sword, and I notice everything much more clearly. Look at the beautiful gargoyles of the church and of the monastery which it belongs to. See how splendidly all the famous banners in the aisle are waving. How nobly that yew holds up the red flakes of its timbers to worship God. How clean the snow is. I can smell something like featherfew and sweet briar. And is it music that I hear?" It was music, whether of panpipes or of recorders, and the light in the churchyard was so clear, without being dazzling, that one could have picked a pin out 20 yards away. "There is something in this place," said the wart. "There are people. Oh, people, what do you want?" Nobody answered him, but the music was loud and the light beautiful. "People," cried the wart, I must take this sword. It is not for me, but for Kay. I will bring it back." There was still no answer, and Wart turned back to the anvil. He saw the golden letters, which he did not read, and the jewels on the pommel flashing in the lovely light. "Come, sword," said the wart. He took hold of the handles with both hands and strained against the stone. There was a melodious consort on the recorders, but nothing moved. The wart let go of the handles when they were beginning to bite into the palms of his hand and stepped back, seeing stars. "It is well fixed," he said. He took hold of it again and pulled with all his might. The music played more strongly, and the light all about the churchyard glowed like amethysts, but the sword still stuck. "Oh, Merlin," cried the wart, "help me to get this weapon." There was a kind of rushing noise, and a long chord played along with it. All round the churchyard there were hundreds of old friends. They rose over the church wall all together like the Punch and Judy ghosts of remembered days. And there were badgers and nightingales and vulgar crows and hares and wild geese and falcons and fishes and dogs and dainty unicorns and solitary wasps and corkendrills and hedgehogs and griffins and the 1,000 other animals he had met. They loomed round the church wall, the lovers and helpers of the wart, and they all spoke solemnly in turn. Some of them had come off the banners in the church where they were painted in heraldry, some from the waters and the sky and the fields about, but all down to the smallest shrew mouse had come to help on account of love. Wart felt his power grow. "Put your back into it," said a pike off one of the heraldic banners, "as you once did when I was going to snap you up. Remember that power springs from the nape of the neck." "What about those forearms," asked a badger gravely, "that are held together by a chest? Come along, my dear embryo, and find your tool." A merlin sitting at the top of the yew tree cried out, "Now then, Captain Wart, what is the first law of the foot? I thought I once heard something about never letting go." "Don't work like a stalling woodpecker," urged a tawny owl affectionately. "Keep up a steady effort, my duck, and you will have it yet." A white front said, "Now, Wart, if you were once able to fly the great North Sea, surely you can coordinate a few little wing muscles here and there. Fold your powers together with the spirit of your mind, and it will come out like butter. Come along, Homo sapiens, for all we humble friends of yours are waiting here to cheer." The wart walked up to the great sword for the 3rd time. He put out his right hand softly and drew it out as gently as from a scabbard. There was a lot of cheering, a noise like a hurdy-gurdy which went on and on. In the middle of this noise, after a long time, he saw Kay and gave him the sword. The people at the tournament were making a frightful row. "But this is not my sword," said Sir Kay. "It was the only one I could get," said the wart. "The inn was locked." "It is a nice-looking sword. Where did you get it?" "I found it stuck in a stone outside a church." Sir Kay had been watching the tilting nervously, waiting for his turn. He had not paid much attention to his squire. "That is a funny place to find one," he said. "Yes, it was stuck through an anvil." "What?" cried Sir Kay, suddenly rounding upon him. "Did you just say this sword was stuck in a stone?" "It was," said the wart. "It was a sort of war memorial." Sir Kay stared at him for several seconds in amazement, opened his mouth, shut it again, licked his lips, then turned his back and plunged through the crowd. He was looking for Sir Ector, and the ward followed after him. "Father!" cried Sir Kay. "Come here a moment."
"Yes, my boy," said Sir Ector. "Splendid falls these professional chaps do manage. Why, what's the matter, Kay? You look as white as a sheet."
"Do you remember that sword which the King of England would pull out?"
"Yes."
"Well, here it is. I have it. It is in my hand. I pulled it out." Sir Ector did not say anything silly. He looked at Kay, and he looked at the wart. Then he stared at Kay again, long and lovingly, and said,
"We will go back to the church. Now then, Kay," he said when they were at the church door.
He looked at his firstborn kindly, but straight between the eyes.
"Here is the stone, and you have the sword. It will make you the King of England. You are my son, that I am proud of and always will be, whatever you do. Will you promise me that you took it out by your own might?"
Kay looked at his father. He also looked at the wart and at the sword. Then he handed the sword to the wart quite quietly. He said, "I am a liar. Wart pulled it out." As far as the wart was concerned, there was a time after this in which Sir Ector kept telling him to put the sword back into the stone, which he did, and in which Sir Ector and Kay then vainly tried to take it out. The wart took it out for them and stuck it back again once or twice. After this, there was another time, which was more painful. He saw that his dear guardian was looking quite old and powerless, and that he was kneeling down with difficulty on a gouty knee.
"Sir,"
said Sir Ector without looking up, although he was speaking to his own boy. "Please do not do this, father," said the wart, kneeling down also. "Let me help you up, Sir Ector, because you are making me very unhappy."
Nay, nay, my lord," said Sir Ector with some very feeble old tears. "I was never your father, nor of your blood, but I wot well ye are of an higher blood than I when ye were."
"Plenty of people have told me you are not my father," said the wart, "but it does not matter a bit."
"Sir," said Sir Ector humbly, "will ye be a good and gracious lord when ye are king?"
"Don't,"
said the wart. "Sir," said Sir Ector, "I will ask no more of you, but that you will make my son, your foster brother, Sir Kay, seneschal of all your lands."
Kay was kneeling down too, and it was more than wart could bear. "Oh, do stop," he cried. "Of course he can be seneschal, if I have got to be this king. No, father, don't kneel down like that, because it breaks my heart. Please get up, Sir Ector, and don't make everything so horrible. Oh, dear, I wish I had never seen that filthy sword at all." And the wart also burst into tears. Chapter 24. Perhaps there ought to be a chapter about the coronation. The barons naturally kicked up a fuss, but as the wart was prepared to go on putting the sword into the stone and pulling it out again till doomsday, and as there was nobody else who could do the thing at all, in the end they had to give in. A few of the Gaelic ones revolted, who were quelled later, but in the main the people of England and the partisans, like Robin, were glad to settle down. They were sick of the anarchy which had been their portion under Uther Pendragon, sick of overlords and feudal giants, of knights who did what they pleased, of racial discrimination, and of the rule of might as right. The coronation was a splendid ceremony. What was still more splendid, it was like a birthday or Christmas Day. Everybody sent presents to the wart for his prowess in having learned to pull swords out of stones, and several burghers of the city of London asked him to help them in taking stoppers out of unruly bottles, unscrewing taps which had got stuck, and in other household emergencies which had got beyond their control. The dog boy and Wat clubbed together and sent him a mixture for the distemper, which contained quinine and was absolutely priceless.
Lioliok sent him some arrows made with her own feathers. Keval came simply and gave him his heart and soul. The nurse of the forest sauvage sent a cough mixture, 30 dozen handkerchiefs all marked, and a pair of combinations with a double chest. The sergeant sent him his crusading medals to be preserved by the nation. Hob lay awake in agony all night and sent off Cully with brand new white leather jesses, silver varvels, and silver bell. Robin and Marian went on an expedition which took them 6 weeks and sent a whole gown made out of the skins of pine martens. Little John added a yew bow 7 feet long, which he was quite unable to draw. An anonymous hedgehog sent 4 or 5 dirty leaves with fleas on them. The questing beast and King Pellinore put their heads together and sent some of their most perfect fumets, wrapped up in the green leaves of spring, in a golden horn with a red velvet baldric. Sir Grummore sent a gross of spears with the old school crest on all of them. The cooks, tenants, villeins, and retainers of the castle of the forest sauvage, who were given an angel each, that's a coin, and sent up for the ceremony in an ox-drawn charabanc at Sir Ector's charge, brought an enormous silver model of Cow Crumbrocky, who had won the championship for the 3rd time, and Ralph Passeljau to sing at the coronation banquet. Archimedes sent his own great-great-grandson, so that he could sit on the back of the king's throne at dinner and make messes on the floor. The Lord Mayor and aldermen of the City of London subscribed for a spacious aquarium mews cum menagerie at the Tower, in which all the creatures were starved 1 day a week for the good of their stomachs. And here, for the fresh food, good bedding, constant attention, and every modern convenience, the Wart's friends resorted in their old age, on wing and foot and fin, for the sunset of their happy lives. The citizens of London sent £50 million to keep the menagerie up, and the ladies of Britain constructed a pair of black velvet carpet slippers with the Wart's initials embroidered in gold. Kay sent his own record griffin with honest love. There were many other tasteful presents from various barons, archbishops, princes, landgraves, tributary kings, corporations, popes, sultans, royal commissions, urban district councils, czars, beys, mahatmas, and so forth. But the nicest present of all was sent most affectionately by his own guardian, old Sir Ector. This present was a dunce's cap, rather like a pharaoh's serpent, that's a kind of firework, which you lit at the top end. The Wart lit it and watched it grow. When the flame had quite gone out, Merlin was standing before him in his magic hat. "Well, Wart," said Merlin, "here we are, or were, again. How nice you look in your crown. I was not allowed to tell you before or since, but your father was, or will be, King Uther Pendragon, and it was I, myself, disguised as a beggar, who first carried you to Sir Ector's castle in your golden swaddling bands. I know all about your birth and parentage, and who gave you your real name. I know the sorrows before you, and the joys, and how there will never again be anybody who dares to call you by the friendly name of Wart. In future it will be your glorious doom to take up the burden, and to enjoy the nobility of your proper title. So now I shall crave the privilege of being the very first of your subjects to address you with it, as my dear liege lord, King Arthur." "Will you stay with me for a long time?" asked the Wart, not understanding much of this. "Yes, Wart," said Merlin, "or rather, as I should say, or is it as I have said, yes, King Arthur." And that is the end of The Sword and the Stone. Although at the bottom it says explicit liber primus, which means end of the first book. Because as I mentioned, The Sword and the Stone is part of a larger work called The Once and Future King. Anyway, let me put that away. So,
there we are. I am going to wrap it up tonight because I'm not going to subject you poor people to 10 minutes of me filling time. And we have now finished the story. So I don't know if I will be back on next week or if I'll need to take a week off to figure out what to do next. I will be open to suggestions, obviously, and we can go forward with that either here on Facebook or, yeah, probably Facebook is easiest for that. I thank you very much for listening to something that many of you probably had not heard before, and but which, as I've said several times, was highly influential. And I'm sure most of you have seen bits and pieces that reminded you of things that I, if not actually stole, that I was very strongly influenced by in the Dragonbone Chair and the subsequent books. And of course, the idea of the young king who does not know he's a king, or queen who does not know she's a queen, and must find their way to their heritage is obviously not something that is particular to me or T.H. White, but is in fact part of folklore and one of our oldest themes in old stories. And as with most things, it's really about finding yourself and learning how to learn. And that's one of the reasons I think that this book resonates for me so strongly. Anyway, so with that, as mentioned, I am going to sign off early tonight. But I thank you so much for your presence and for your support. And as I said, I don't know what's going to happen next week yet. I might take a week off. I might not. Depends on if I suddenly think of something or somebody suggests something and I say, oh, hooray, that is a good suggestion. So until that point, be kind to yourself, be good to yourself, be good to your friends and loved ones, and help the people around you when you can. Sometimes even just a smile or a kind word is an important thing for somebody having a difficult time. And I will see you one way or the other, at the most in 2 weeks, more likely in 1 week. And again, thank you for going on this journey with me. Peace, be well, and ciao. See you soon, my wild darlings.